it's only a story.
That's what I'm talking about. The ones you read are safe.
In a time where Hollywood dominated any film industry, a few scrappy Western German people decided that the world needs a fantasy story that has nothing to do with the Hollywood machine, and it had to have a wide reach with children that can also play into adults, just as much as the Disney company would. So how do you do it? Simple. Adapt a book that is good but not as well known and strive to make the best movie you can. So, have they succeeded? Let's find out. I'm Meffistoe. Like, share, and subscribe because this is my review of the movie The NeverEnding Story.
We can't wait for a snail. Can I carry you?
Don't worry, it's a racing snail.
Oh.
The NeverEnding Story is a fantasy film directed by Wolfgang Petersen and co-written by Petersen and Herman Wiggle. The original story was written by Michael Ende, and the rights were bought for $50,000, and Ende himself was brought on board to be a script consultant on set. The movie, although in full English, was a full-on German production and mostly shot in Germany for the interior shots and in Vancouver, Canada for the exterior. But there were problems straight from the get-go, not because of casting or crew, but because of the script. Ende realized that Petersen has written many changes into the script, which according to him was so far removed from the draft he read and even farther away from the original story. Ende then left furiously and asked not to be credited on the film, nor would the movie suggest that it is an adaptation of his work. But regardless of all of that, it was a commercial success in the box office and definitely on home video.
He who wears the orin speaks for the Empress. It will guide and protect you.
The story of the film tells of Bastian, a shy 10-year-old kid that recently lost his mother. Bastian is being picked on the way to school, and he ends up finding a hiding spot inside a bookstore.
No, I was just...
The video arcade is down the street. Here we just sell small rectangular objects. They're called books.
The owner tries to shoo him away until he realizes that Bastian actually loves reading books. Bastian himself is actually interested in the book that the owner is reading, especially after the owner says that the book is too dangerous for little boys. Bastian takes advantage of the fact that the owner went to pick up a phone call and steals the book and heads to school.
It was midnight in the howling forest. The wind whistled through the tops of the ancient trees.
When he realizes that he is way too late to go into class, he decides to go up in the attic of the school and start reading. Once there, he reads about this fantastical world called Fantasia that has a problem. The world is dying, and the empress who rules it is dying as well. It is down to a brave warrior called Atreyu to go out there and find a cure for the empress and save the whole of Fantasia.
Actually, we don't care.
If I don't save her, she'll die! There's a terrible nothing sweeping over the land!
The NeverEnding Story is a unique kind of story. There is the story outside of the confines of the book happening with Bastian, and there is the fantastical story told within the confines of the book as Bastian keeps reading. In a way, Bastian is somewhat of the narrator of the book, but only to an extent. The adventures happening to Atreyu are told from his perspective. However, whenever Bastian has a reaction to them, we step outside of the fantasy world and port it into the real world. And if you've seen The Princess Bride, it is very much like that story.
Atreyu slowly opened his eyes and found himself in strange surroundings.
Despite the fact that the book is a fantastical adventure story, the motif of death, despair, depression is prevalent in the book. Themes that most adults would consider to be too heavy for children's fantasy movie, but I feel like they are missing in today's current climate. Let me be clear, the movie is filled with hope, joy, and fun. It is not a dark fantasy by any means, but it does show a roundabout way on how you can deal with feelings that are terribly hard, especially especially at that young age. And the fantastical story that is told within the book is using allegory, metaphors, and imagination to get the point across and tries to tackle the heavy subjects with a little bit of razzle-dazzle. And I must admit, I have never said so many words to describe something just in order to go around so many spoilers, but there you have it.
She says that you are drawing horses in your math book.
Unicorns. They were unicorns.
What?
Generally speaking, the key elements in a fantasy film, much like this one, is not only nailing the story, but also the visual effects. The puppetry design and workmanship was done by the Jim Henson Company, probably the only high-grade puppet company there was at the time, and as always, created unique-looking characters coloring the screen. From the Rockbiter to Falcor, from the snail to the bat, and the attendees in the ivory tower. It what made the world different from other fantasy world at the time, and it was a model that was used to replicate in other fantasy films.
Atreyu has two faces, true self.
That won't be too hard for him.
That's what everyone thinks.
Usually I talk a little bit about the acting or the casting, but because most of it is falling on the shoulders of children, or at least children at the time, I will skip it and say they all did a fine job. But I do want to talk about the music, which is a big part of the success of this movie. Up to that point in time, and of course a little bit after that, fantasy films had an orchestra score to go along with it. And yes, the NeverEnding Story does have that, but the composer, Klaus Dollinger, came from a jazz background and infused a little bit of the old German Euro pop into the score and had influence over the soundtrack as well. The theme song that came along with this movie was composed by Giorgio Moroder with lyrics by Keith Forsey. The song, sang by Lamel and Beth Anderson, is one of the most Europop songs ever created for a movie. It kind of helps to date the movie for a specific time in so many ways, but if you play it without any context to a person that has never heard about this movie, you'll probably get an eyebrow raised and asked, is this from a movie or something? In conclusion, The NeverEnding Story is a heartfelt tale of a boy dealing with the loss of his mother by losing himself into stories of fantasy and adventure. The movie is happy and sad, filled with adventure, heartbreak, and overcoming adversities. A movie that I will happily suggest to all ages. It has got some nasty moments and things that young kids don't normally handle, but it leads to a crescendo that is worth every single second that you shed tears in. It did influence a lot of future creators, not just in film or music, but also in video games. And it is one of those movies that you're most likely have heard the song for before you actually saw the movie, and you might even seen a pop culture reference before even watching 1 minute of it. It is one of those movies that kind of solidified my opinion that 1984 is the greatest year in movie history. So I give it a high recommendation, especially if you've never seen it before, or if you just need a refresher.
But why?
Because people who have no hopes are easy to control.
I thank you for watching, and remember, hope is a good thing, maybe even the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. I'll see you on the next video.